The government says they are key to economic recovery, but businesses have told BBC South that they're facing another barrier to success. Small and medium-sized firms say banks are putting them under pressure to convert their overdrafts into loans that they don't want. Members of the Thames Valley branch of the Federation of Small Businesses say the move means extra monthly charges that could run into thousands of pounds a year. Here's our business correspondent Alistair Fee.
The banks have long been criticised for not lending, but now there's evidence that firms who don't want a fixed loan are being put under pressure to take one on.
The number of businesses that are in the Thames Valley, I think if a poll was conducted with all those businesses and they'd all come forward, I bet it would be a massive, massive problem.
Businesses like Focal Point in Hook say they value their flexible overdrafts, giving them access to finance when they need it, but the banks aren't listening.
I think the banks are frightened. I think they've gone from stupidity at one end of the scale to stupidity at the other end of the scale. They're frightened of actually making a decision on their own now. They're not helping businesses, they're actually hindering businesses, and the whole process of the growth in our economy is being completely affected and hindered by the banks.
With an overdraft, businesses only incur a charge when they go overdrawn, but with a fixed loan, they're stuck with regular, expensive monthly or quarterly charges. So this move looks like it's better for the banks, and there are some who think there's a more topical agenda at work here. Could this be about lending?
Forgive me for being cynical, but every time a new loan is written, it adds to their lending figures that they report to government. Every time they issue a new facility, they'll count it as new lending. I doubt whether they actually say, oh, we'll not count that one because actually it's replaced an overdraft and that doesn't count.
A request for an overdraft. It's the sort of thing one must discuss with a man himself.
Long gone are the days when bank managers knew their customers and made personal decisions.
Hi Ron, how are you?
Oh, Mark, thank you.
For 25 years, Colin Willman worked in banking, 10 of those as a branch manager. He now advises businesses from a centre in Bracknell.
It was broadly sensible in those days, yes, and I would like to see a return to it, especially for the micro business. We hear it all the time. People go for a renewal of their overdraft facility and are told that they've got to actually put it to a loan account.
It's not clear how many businesses are being pressed to stop working off their overdrafts. Conservative estimates say there could be hundreds in the Thames Valley alone. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today.
Well, I spoke to Brian Capon from the British Banking Association, and I asked him why businesses were being pressured to convert flexible overdrafts into loans.
Well, overdrafts are designed very much to meet day-to-day working capital requirements. So part of the time they would tend to be in credit, part of the time overdrawn. But for any longer-term borrowing, it's much more appropriate to keep that on a loan basis, which makes it easier to manage. It's regular repayments to pay that borrowing down.
Some small companies have spoken to banks saying they don't want this. They want the traditional flexible overdrafts, that banks are trying to change the goalposts. And in a sense, the banks are putting themselves before businesses once again.
No, they're not putting themselves before businesses. In some cases, in fact, it's not advantageous for the bank itself
but are there more,
to transfer
sorry to
borrowing
interrupt you, but can I just come back on that and say, but are there more charges for small businesses on loans than there would be on a flexible overdraft?
That's not necessarily true. It can be cheaper, in fact, for the business. But I think the key thing is banks need to lend responsibly. They need to lend appropriately. And the maximum amount that should ever be on an overdraft that's overdrawn is quite simply the amount that business is currently owed by its own customers.
We're in recession. Initial growth will come from small businesses. They say that they're getting the rough end of the stick, that it appears the banks aren't helping them. In fact, the banks are not listening.
There are not more costs, certainly. Banks are having to look very closely,
but they're telling us that. So obviously there is something there.
Well, the cost is obviously a commercial thing between the customer and the bank, and different banks may well have different views on what an appropriate level of risk or level of cost is. So, it's important perhaps to shop around if you think you're not getting the best deal.
What about this lending that we hear so much about, and there hasn't been enough by the banks? We've had recently the new funding for lending scheme to make cheap funds available to banks and lenders to pass that on to borrowers, commercial and personal. And some would say that it's actually not getting through to the people it needs to get through to.
Small businesses at the moment, businesses in general, some of of them are making those decisions. You know, this isn't the right time to expand or to invest more in the business. In fact, 2/3 of businesses just do not want to borrow money at all. They feel the time is not right for them. So I think it's very much a case of demand rather than supply. The banks are there, willing and able to lend to a good, viable business that can prove to the bank they've got the right business plan together, and they can prove that the business can repay that borrowing.
Brian Cabon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.